The end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, that is to say the time which intellectually molded our heroes, was the end of one era and the beginning of a new one. The Russian people had been waiting for something that would turn their entire lives upside down. They dreamed of revolution. Revolution, however, meant different things to different people. For some it was a political upheaval. For others it was an intellectual, even a spiritual rebirth. This was a paradoxical time, when violence in the name of God could be found alongside sincere spiritual seeking. And in this regard, Anna Abrikosova and her husband Vladimir were striking representatives of their time. But they chose the spiritual way, the way that would lead to new horizons in their lives. Anna Ivanovna Abrikosova was born into an affluent family in Moscow on January 2nd, 1883. It was one of the best-known dynasties of Russian industry, controlling a major confectionery factory that is now known as Babayevskaya. Anna graduated from grammar school in Moscow and received her higher education in England at Cambridge University. Having returned to Moscow, she married her cousin, Vladimir Vladimirovich Abrikosov, a graduate in 1903 of Moscow State University. In his youth, he was a through-and-through socialite, and he also had very broad interests, perceiving everything unusually deeply and sensitively. His friends always said, "Vova Abrikosov is a very nice fellow, but he'll end up in a monastery." The Abrikosovs were not entirely unreligious people, although in day-to-day life they got by without God. For their honeymoon, they went abroad. Once, during an evening walk, they were visited by a strange vision. Looking at the sauntering public, instead of dolled-up people, they suddenly saw a crowd of skeletons, haphazardly covered with rags. "What is that?" they asked each other. And simultaneously they understood that they had both witnessed the same thing. The vision disappeared, ordinary people were again strolling around sedately, but it left a deep mark in their souls and awoke a new interest in spiritual life. The couple had hardly any experience in the religious life of the Orthodox Church, and they turned toward Western religious culture. They began to read extensively, and they became more and more inclined toward Catholicism. Initially, in 1908, Anna decided to join the Catholic Church. That took place in Paris, in St. Vincent de Paul Chapel. 1 year later, in 1909, Vladimir Abrikosov also joined the Catholic Church, in Paris as well, in the parish of St. Magdalene. On November 21, 1913, in Rome, the Abrikosovs took the vows of obedience and poverty and became members of the Dominican order. Later, the husband and wife took the vow of chastity and began to live as brother and sister. His Holiness Father Pius X received them in a private audience, during which he showed keen interest in the conditions in Moscow. They received a blessing from the Pope for their future activity in Russia. In addition, they were told that they could temporarily follow the Latin Rite, but the Pope, however, ordered them, as soon as it would be possible, to return to observing the Byzantine Rite. So just what was this idea of a Catholic Church of the Byzantine Rite? The truth is that these small communities of Catholics of the Byzantine Rite, which had emerged by that time in Russia, were supposed first and foremost to have become examples for those who were members of the Orthodox Church. Here's what their example was intended to demonstrate. First, that one could remain in his religious and the national culture and be completely Orthodox, and second, be Catholic. Now, what does that mean, to be a Catholic? Above all, it means to recognize the special mission of the Roman bishop in the ecumenical church. And these Eastern Catholics should strictly continue to observe the Byzantine Rite. They should be the same as Orthodox believers, so as to be trusted and to show that there was nothing contradictory in their view, that simply nothing superior to the Roman bishop could exist. And that was the tricky task that was assigned to them by the Church. These communities were not supposed to lead to some vast conversion to Catholicism. In this case, there was nothing similar to what is now called proselytizing. They were supposed to be small but conspicuous examples. Their activities were oriented toward the future. They were supposed to become the beginning of a slow, patient, profound, and equal dialogue with the orthodoxy.
Gradually, the soul begins to recognize in itself the awakening of a new life, the consciousness that there is a God, and the craving for Him is a fiery and insatiable one.
From 1913 through 1917, the former husband and wife, now brother and sister, the Abrikosovs began to gather around themselves young girls, wishing to find souls that would be committed entirely to God. In order to better satisfy their aspirations toward a spiritual life, the girls decided to unite under Anna's command. This first group became the nucleus of the future commune of Dominican sisters. By 1917, there were more than 10 people in the group. For the time being, the informal commune was located in the Abrikosovs' apartment. One of the rooms was transformed into a chapel. Anna lived in another room, and 2 more rooms were used as a dormitory for the sisters. They slept on the floor at night, and in the afternoon it was all cleaned up carefully, and the sleeping quarters were turned into a reception room and a classroom with a library. There, the future sisters studied Catholic religious doctrine. They lived this quiet life against the roaring background of World War I.
Everything that she has been doing seemed to her petty and insipid. She wants heroic deeds and martyrdom for her love of the Lord, as his death cry lives and incessantly rings within her, I thirst.
In February of 1917, a democratic revolution took place in Russia. One of the first decrees of the new government regarded the freedom of worship. At last, Russian Catholics of the Byzantine Rite could profess their faith openly. From May 29th through May 31st, 1917, the First Council of Russian Catholics took place under the chairmanship of Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky in Petrograd. The council adopted a number of pronouncements which were of profound importance for the development of the Russian Catholic Church of the Byzantine Rite. First of all, the council recognized the supreme authority of the Roman Pope over the Russian Catholic Church, while maintaining the Byzantine Rite and veneration of the saints of both Western and Russian origin. Thanks to the pronouncements of the Council, the Russian Catholics of the Byzantine Rite could commence the organization of church parishes. The first of these were formed in Petrograd and in Moscow. Using the mandate received from Pope Pius X, Metropolitan Sheptytsky appointed Father Leonid Fyodorov as the exarch of the Russian Catholics, and ordained Vladimir Abrikosov as a priest. He was commissioned with taking care of the parish in Moscow. Father Vladimir and Anna devoted themselves entirely to church life. For him, it was the management of his little parish. For her, it was the organization of a full-fledged community of Dominican sisters. On August 17, 1917, the sisters made a decision to conduct their lives under a monastic charter, and they asked Anna Abrikosova to be their prioress. Anna selected St. Catherine of Siena to be her patroness, and Father Vladimir chose St. Thomas Aquinas. When in Moscow, Father Leonid Fyodorov always visited Mother Ekaterina, which was Anna's new name.
Sainthood, sainthood, they repeat. We want our Catholics to be saints.
The period of religious freedom was very short, however. On November 7, 1917, the Bolshevik coup took place in Russia. Vladimir Lenin's party came to power. Civil war, famine, and chaos began in the country. From the first days of its existence, the new government began its fight against religion and the physical destruction of believers. As usual, 2 masses were served in the commune every day. Orthodox believers also attended these services. On Sundays and holidays, after Mass, agape, a collective tea, would be arranged. Groceries had long ago disappeared from shop counters, and tea was made from dried carrots. While they were drinking tea, they would have conversations, and after that, spiritual readings would begin. Anna herself would read something translated from Western Catholic literature, sermons, or hagiographies. Amid the bloody feast of the Civil War and arbitrary arrests and executions, Anna and the sisters vowed to sacrifice themselves to rescue Russia.
In honor and glory of the Almighty, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, the Blessed Virgin Mary and Saint Dominic, we give our lives to the last drop of our blood to the Holy Trinity as a sacrifice for the sake of saving Russia.
In 1922, the campaign of persecution against religion in Soviet Russia expanded to an even wider front.
Rage, hatred, and disgust like waves rose in the hearts of human beings. Hands convulsively clasped stones, and humanity was choked with one common feeling. We do not want him. We don't. We do not want him to reign over us.
Life got harder and harder for Father Vladimir. Work in his parish, meetings, visits, and conversations occupied much of his time and energy, and forced him to struggle to do everything at once. Moreover, he was also the sisters' confessor. His health had also weakened, and he almost never left home.
If Father Vladimir dies, which is quite possible, as he already cannot complete a service without extreme exhaustion, only Father Leonid will be left. What solitude, what emptiness.
People would say about them that the sisters are hurrying to live. Day after day they worked, accomplishing an astounding amount. They gave lessons to parish children, translated or copied books which they would read together with the parishioners, looked after patients and fed the starving elderly and homeless in their kitchen. They also had about 10 children to take care of, including several orphans. The sisters seemed to foresee the ordeals that were soon to come, during which they would be deprived of this blessed commune life and the holy sacraments. The time to begin the long way of the cross was approaching. On August 17, 1922, at dawn, when the sisters had started to sing matins, Father Vladimir was arrested, and after a brief interrogation was sentenced to the supreme punishment. Later, the execution was commuted to permanent exile abroad. His spouse was offered the opportunity to go with him. Anna Ivanovna Abrikosova had made her choice. She had decided to stay in Russia and to continue her life's work, fulfilling the vow of sacrifice that she had given for Russia. On September 29, 1922, Father Vladimir left Russia. Anna's fellow fighter, the man whom she loved so much, had departed.
I'm truly alone with half-dressed kids and the sisters who are struggling to get everything done, expecting to be arrested ourselves. We feel like grains of sand in the hands of God, and where we'll be carried off to, we don't know. We need to live by the pure acts of faith, hope, and love. And meanwhile, the commune of sisters is growing. There are already 18 of us here.
On November 11, 1923, State Political Directorate employees arrived and started a search of the premises, which lasted until morning. All the sisters were gathered into one room. Some were reading, others were praying. They were all completely calm. Anna and half of the sisters were arrested. The other orphaned sisters, not having a liturgy in their chapel anymore, began to attend the Immaculate Conception of the Holy Virgin Mary Church. On March 9, 1924, a second search was performed there, and the rest of the sisters were arrested. All the arrested were held in Butyrskaya prison in Moscow. To strengthen their spirit, all the sisters prayed. It was the only way to keep their spiritual composure.
In Initially, Mother Ekaterina was placed in solitary confinement, but then she was transferred to a cell for criminals who had been imprisoned for theft, prostitution, robbery, and other more heinous crimes. That was done to make Mother's imprisonment more arduous. Constant noise, screaming, arguments and fighting were always in the cell. One day, when it was already cold, another woman was ushered into the cell. Nobody would let her lie down beside herself. She went to the bed beside Mother Ekaterina, who covered her with a blanket. The other women warned her, "Don't do that, she's contagious, she has syphilis." Mother Ekaterina replied to that, "So what? If I'm infected, I'll be treated." Lent was coming to an end. The Holy Week had begun. On Holy Saturday, a long prison table was covered with bed sheets and red Easter eggs. Cakes and everything else they had was nicely arranged on it. The sisters themselves stood in front of a large window and, praying, waited for the bell's first toll. At 12 o'clock, they heard the roar of the Easter peal, announcing the morning prayer. The doors, with their metal-bound spy holes, the gloomy cell and the window grates all disappeared. Joyfully, lightly, and freely, the soul flew high up into the air, toward the stars, shining in the dark skies, and merging together with the triumphant hymn of the world, praising and glorifying the resurrected Christ.
Mother Ekaterina and the sisters were certain that the Lord had accepted their vow of sacrifice for Russia, and they took their arrest and imprisonment as the answer to their vow and the mercy of God, who gave them the happiness of growing accustomed to his cross of purifying suffering. In the beginning of July 1924, the judgments in absentia from the panel of State Political Directorate were read in the cell, and they turned out to be more severe than could have been expected. Anna and the sisters were sentenced to terms of 5 to 10 years on charges of counter-revolutionary activities. After signing the verdict, which the sisters accepted with pleasure as an obvious display of the will of the Lord, who had accepted their eagerness to suffer for Russia, the sisters started singing a hymn of gratitude.
Probably every one of you, loving God and following Him, has more than once asked Christ to grant this possibility of participating in His suffering. Now that moment has arrived. Now our desire to suffer for Him is being realized. Mother Ekaterina and the sisters were transported to Sverdlovsk in one railway car. As they arrived at the prison, they saw women sitting and lying next to the cell. The sisters thought there were already no more room in the cell, but when they opened the door, they saw that it was absolutely empty. The reason for that became clear just as soon as everyone laid down and began to fall asleep. Countless bedbugs pounced on them. It was torture. Mother kept lying, and when one of the sisters sat behind her and started picking the bugs off of her, she prohibited the sister from doing so.
In the prison, Anna was again placed in the same cell as the ordinary criminals. Living among them, Mother, maintaining her dignity, treated them warmly and simply, constantly sharing with them all that she herself received. They began to respect her, to love her and even to take care of her, not allowing her to do any physical work. They would wash floors for her, clean and do her laundry. If disorder broke out among the criminals and prison authorities were unable to stop it, supervisors would say, "We should call Abrikosova and it will all end." Regardless of all that, life in prison seriously affected Anna's health. Prison authorities did not like Anna's popularity, and in 1929 she was transferred to the Yaroslavl political prison, known for its severe conditions. During prison walks, she was lucky enough to have the opportunity to go to confession, as she would meet priests among the prisoners. A Polish priest, Father Theofil Skalski, became Anna's confessor. After he was released in 1932 and ended up in Rome, he wrote a letter to Father Vladimir Abrikosov in which there were the following lines.
Anna Ivanovna endured her lot as a Soviet prisoner with an unimaginable calmness and humility. We lived in adjoining cells, and what's more, every day we were led out to have our walk in the same group. Several times people from the state political directorate approached Anna with proposals, or rather with temptations for her to renounce her Catholic creed, but in her answers she remained merciless towards herself and persistent in her avowal of the unwavering truth of the only Catholic Church. Having confessed to me that a tumor was growing on her breast, I insisted that she see a doctor, and the doctor, realizing that it was cancer, sent her to an infirmary in Moscow. As her departure approached, she had an opportunity to get herself ready, and therefore, first of all, she became occupied with her soul, and asked me to hear her confession for her entire life. That was in the spring and summer of 1931.
In Moscow, in a prison hospital, Anna Abrikosova underwent surgery. Her left breast and part of her back and side muscles were removed, after which she was left disabled. She couldn't move her left arm. On August 13th, Anna was surprised to hear that her imprisonment had ended. She was released because of her sickness. Having left prison, Anna made her way directly to the Church of St. Louis in Moscow. Bishop Neveu was not previously acquainted with her, and after his first meeting with Anna, he informed Father Vladimir of the following.
This genuine penitent is very courageous. In front of such a toughened soul, one feels absolutely small. She still looks unwell after her surgery, and she only uses her right arm as she cannot control the left one anymore.
After Anna was released, she was prohibited from staying in Moscow. She left for Kostroma, and she stayed there in a room in a suburb of the city together with Sister Margarita. One of those who saw Mother at that time defined her spiritual state in the following way. She is all strength and at the same time meekness. Several times Anna traveled to Moscow for doctor's appointments. She also found the strength to meet with the sisters who had already been released from prison, giving them moral support and continuing to guide them spiritually.
Do not think, my mother, that we complain of our fates and about how unhappy we are. On the contrary, we thank God for the great honor and opportunity to suffer for Him that has been presented to us. The only thing that we are afraid of is that we are unworthy of this mission. At the present moment, all of my sisters can be divided into 3 groups: those who are free, those who have been sent into exile, and those who have been imprisoned. But I am glad to tell you that all of them live intense lives full of diligence, lives that are deeply Dominican.
On August 5th, 1933, Anna was arrested again. This time the pretext was much more serious: preparing an assassination attempt against Stalin. She was immediately placed in solitary confinement so that the sisters would never see her again. On February 19th, 1934, Anna Ivanovna Abrikosova was sentenced to 8 years of imprisonment and sent again to the Yaroslavl political jail. Details of the last days of her life are still unknown. She died from cancer at the age of 54 on July 23, 1936. Her body was cremated. And after the rehabilitations and the Khrushchev thaw, those sisters of the Abrikosov commune who survived settled in Moscow and Vilnius. They immediately established around themselves a new social circle and a new gathering of like-minded people. Of course, they understood that it was a very risky undertaking, and consequently they did everything with great precautions. It is interesting that they were surrounded not only by Catholics, but also by Orthodox believers. And this is exactly where that Eastern idea was realized, which was created in the first Abrikosov's commune. There were Orthodox lay people, priests, and even one bishop. It was an attempt to resurrect the commune under new conditions and with new people. This connection is alive up to the present day. And certainly, at first glance, the work of the Abrikosov's commune was doomed to failure. It was destroyed. But despite everything, the tradition has survived and is still alive to this day.
Thank you.